At 7:12 p.m., a deputy stepped into a suburban garage for what he thought would be a simple welfare check. 5 minutes later, his radio cracked with a trembling voice. "We've got something in here. Send everyone." What he found would haunt him forever. Because behind that garage door was not just a missing person, not just a crime scene, but a secret so twisted that investigators called it one of the darkest discoveries in American suburbia. And the terrifying part? It could have happened in your neighborhood. Police don't usually fear welfare checks. They're routine. A neighbor hasn't seen someone in days. A mailbox is overflowing. A family member can't reach their loved one. 90% of the time, it's nothing. But sometimes, it's everything. That night, the call came from a worried sister. Her brother, Daniel, 42, quiet, kept to himself, hadn't answered calls in nearly a week. No posts online, no movement outside the house. She begged them, "Please, just check his place. Something's wrong." Officers arrived at a tidy 2-story home. Lights off, curtains drawn, the mailbox stuffed full. They knocked. No answer. They knocked harder. Still nothing. That's when they noticed it, from the side of the house. A smell. If you've ever smelled it, you never forget. Rot. Decay. The stench of death. One officer whispered, "We're not leaving until we get inside." They entered through the back door. The kitchen was neat, almost too neat. A half-drunk glass of water sat on the table. Mail stacked carefully, shoes lined by the door. No signs of struggle, no signs of Daniel. But the smell was stronger. It pulled them, like invisible hands, toward the garage. The door was locked. They forced it open, and in that instant, the entire case changed. Because inside that garage, police discovered something unthinkable. But before I tell you what they saw, imagine this. You live next door to someone for years. You wave when you take out the trash. You nod when you mow the lawn. You think you know them. And then one night, cops open their garage and uncover something so horrifying, you can never look at that house the same way again. That's exactly what happened on Maple Street. When the flashlight beams hit the garage floor, officers froze. There, in the center of the concrete, sat a large wooden chest. Old, padlocked, but smeared with something dark. The smell was overwhelming. One deputy muttered, "Please, please let this be old meat." But it wasn't. When they pried the chest open, inside was Daniel, or at least what was left of him. Here's where it gets strange. Daniel's hands were bound, his mouth duct-taped, and yet there were no signs of forced entry in the house. No smashed windows, no broken locks. It looked as if Daniel had been tied, silenced, and willingly walked into his own garage. Why would he do that? Who did this to him? And then police noticed something chilling. On the garage wall, written in thick black marker, were 4 words, "I let them in." At this point, detectives thought they were dealing with a home invasion. Maybe Daniel had trusted the wrong person. Maybe he'd let someone inside. But as they dug deeper, the story unraveled into something far darker. Daniel wasn't just any ordinary man. He had a secret. And his neighbors? They had noticed strange things for years. Lights flicking on at 3 a.m., muffled voices when no one was visiting, and sometimes a shadow in the garage window, standing perfectly still. But no one asked questions. Because who wants to believe the nightmare could be next door? Investigators searched the house top to bottom. No signs of robbery, no forced entry, no struggle. But in Daniel's bedroom, tucked beneath his mattress, they found a small notebook. Inside were pages of names, dozens of them, each with a date. And beside some names, a single word: taken. Here's where it gets terrifying. Police ran those names through databases. Several belonged to missing persons, unsolved cases stretching back nearly a decade. Daniel wasn't a victim. Daniel was a predator. But then who killed him? And why write "I let them in" on his own wall? If this case already has you hooked, hit subscribe, because the next twist is insane. Forensic teams worked through the night, and what they found in the garage was worse than Daniel's body. Behind a stack of boxes hidden under a tarp was another chest, this one smaller. But inside was evidence: wallets, ID cards, jewelry, all belonging to people who had vanished. Daniel had been keeping trophies. But here is the question that gnawed at detectives. How did Daniel end up bound and gagged in his own chest? Did one of his victims escape and turn the tables? Or was there someone else, an accomplice, who finally decided to silence him? The autopsy revealed something strange. Daniel hadn't died from suffocation. He hadn't been stabbed. He hadn't been shot. He'd been poisoned, which means someone close enough to gain his trust slipped it into his system, and then staged the scene in the garage. Detectives circled back to the notebook. One name was underlined, a name that had been reported missing just 6 months earlier, a young woman named Emily Carter. Her case had gone cold. But when police dug through phone records, they found dozens of calls between her and Daniel in the weeks before she vanished. She'd met him through a local community forum. He'd offered to help her find a job. She disappeared days later. So was it Emily's family, a vigilante, or Emily herself, somehow escaping and taking revenge? The truth is, no one knows. To this day, Daniel's killer has never been identified. No fingerprints on the duct tape, no DNA on the poison vial found in the kitchen. Nothing. Almost as if whoever did this wanted Daniel erased, but didn't want credit. And here's the part that keeps neighbors awake at night. In that notebook, those dozens of names, half of them are still unaccounted for. Were they real victims, or just Daniel's fantasies written on paper? No one can say for sure. But imagine this. The man next door, quiet, polite, never causing trouble. Turns out he may have been a serial predator, and someone out there, maybe even someone you've walked past on the street, knew him well enough to kill him and get away with it. That garage on Maple Street has since been cleaned out, the house sold, the new family unaware of the horrors that once sat inside those walls. But for the officers who opened that chest, the smell never leaves them. Neither do the words on the wall. I let them in. And if you think this case was bad, wait until you hear about the woman who vanished from her own wedding. You watched until the end. Now you can't unhear this. Subscribe for more stories that will haunt you.